Next up, we will have the city treasurer, and why don't we bring the sinking fund department up also. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You can state your name for the record, and please proceed with your testimony.
Rashia Johnson, City Treasurer. Good afternoon, Council President Clark and members of Council. I'm Rashia Johnson, City Treasurer. Joining me today are Christian Dunbar, Deputy City Treasurer for Debt Management, Christopher Swartz, Deputy City Treasurer for Banking and Investment, and Matthew Bowman, Executive Director of the Sinking Fund Commission. I'm pleased to provide testimony on the City Treasurer's Office for Fiscal Year 2019 operating budget. The proposed Fiscal Year 2019 General Fund budget totals $1.6 million, an increase of $531,000 over Fiscal Year 2018 estimated obligation levels. The increase is primarily due to the addition of funds for an outside consultant to assist with the consolidated cash account reconciliation. The remainder of my written testimony that you have lays out the Treasurer's Office key initiatives and activities. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the proposed Fiscal Year 2019 budget for the Treasurer's Office, and I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
All right. Second best testimony today.
I'm trying to, channel Rob a little
following
bit.
Rob DeBose model. All right, that's great. Just had a couple of questions,
Sure.
and then I don't know if you had an opportunity to check earlier. Okay, well, let me get these two out of the way. In your testimony, you highlight the investment management services, or RFP,
Yes.
essentially to build diversity and a larger pool of eligible investments. Has the city's investment management policy changed in response to the recent months of market volatility? Because it has been somewhat challenging. So are we looking to invest differently? Are we being more cautious? Or are we taking a wait-and-see attitude with respect to our investment strategy?
Well, for the Treasurer's Office, and our investment policy is very short in duration and very conservative.
Okay.
So right now we are on the very short end. A lot of government, treasuries, agencies, things of that nature, nothing. We're very risk averse because we know we
I
need
actually know that.
but we are looking at our investment policy because it's time to just take a look at it, and we are looking at it to update it and dust it off to make sure that it is current and relevant.
Okay. On your, this is actually some interesting news. Page 3 of your testimony, you show a MWDB contract participation goal of 30% for FY17 and 18. Mm-hmm. And according to your testimony, participation rate in 17 ended in 44%, and FY18 shows 57% achieved so far.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, what is it that you're doing that has gotten to a point where I'm quite excited about these rates? And if so, is it transferable to other departments?
Well, one, it's important to me, and we take a look at it with every opportunity that we have, whether it's on the investment management side. One, a reason why we did the RFP to bring a little bit more diversity, as well as widen our bench on the investment management side, and then with our bond transactions as well, making sure that we have qualified, talented professionals, just not our workforce, but also our professionals that look like the makeup of the city of Philadelphia.
All right. Okay. Well, I want to commend you on that, because I think that in the past there has not been enough emphasis put on the professional services side, particularly as it relates to government in terms of having a real strong participation goal/rate. And I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
I think that you may want to put out a little template, because at the end of the day, I just come from the school that if you really want to do it, you can figure out a way to do it. If you really don't want to do it, then it's not going to happen. And so I want to commend you so much for continuing to do that.
Thank you.
Last but not least, with respect to the earlier question in terms of the administrative fees / costs associated with the loan service versus what we've been.
So again, from the proposals we had with average loan size, it's like almost 30%, and then we just did a quick, rough and dirty, not public query, and usually those fees range between like the 4 to 7%.
4 to 7 versus
Yes.
30. Okay.
Yes. So we'd like to streamline that a little bit more to.
A whole lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So in terms of that conversation around, I don't know if you kind of indicated that you were going to be having a conversation. Is there any remote legitimate basis for why it's 30? Is it because of the risk associated with the loan product, or why 7 to 40, 30? I mean, that's a big gap.
You can go ahead.
If I can jump in, Council President, Christian Dunbar, Deputy City Treasurer. I think it really starts with the relative loan size, right? So if you look at most typical loans, particularly when we're talking about home improvement loans, you could get loans from 50, 100 plus more. These loans are relatively low, so those fixed costs are going to have a greater effect in terms of the rate than a loan of $100,000 size. So the average loan size here is probably going to be somewhere around $10,000. That's what we're sort of projecting. And then because of the population we're serving, and I know your office and Councilwoman Parker's office want to make sure we brought down the rate, and that there's a cost there. There's a cost associated with the program intermediaries to really help folks understand their credit and get into this program. There's a cost associated with getting this information out. And so all those costs, when you add them up to a relatively low loan size, is what really drives up the cost of this program, which is something we're working on to try to see where places we can try to drive down that cost, and then potentially see if the average loan size, if we can increase those loan sizes, then I think you have a bit of a balance. But it's difficult to serve this population, and make it cost effective at the same time. So those are some of the challenges we're running into now.
So in terms of the 4 to 7%, is that comparable to the loan size? I mean, when you ask that question, is it a loan number similar to what we're
Comparable to
talking?
the loan size, but maybe not the demographics.
I understand.
Yes.
No, I know the demographic. People, well, that's the banking world,
Right.
they're extremely conservative, and I still believe they got some other stuff going on that has nothing to do with the financial aspect, but that's the social policy. With respect to our accounts for depositories,
Yes.
do we put any requirements on them as it relates to, such as an example, when we try to get a response for an RFP that we put out for some service, such as participating in a loan program such as the one we're interested in, is there any relationship to responses to programs such as that to our ultimate selection process? Or do we simply look at the bottom line in terms of the fees associated with handling our payroll account, as an example? RFPs and the selection, I'm assuming in this particular world you associate or you attach certain point system. I don't know exactly how you all do it, but if you have a institution that's more socially responsive in terms of where we may ultimately want to put our money, is that taken into an account versus one that may just give us a good number in terms of servicing our accounts? I know it was a long question.
Of
But
course.
you kind of get my gist.
Yeah, I get where you're going. Of
the
course.
bottom line is,
we
you want to
look
have
at-
my money,
Yeah, we look at
I
fees.
need you to participate in this program.
Yes, we definitely look at fees, but then we also look at to see what the particular depositories are doing in the community. But a lot of times they may have various programs, but we did encourage all of our depositories to take a look at this RFP. If I'm not mistaken, there was a pre-bid conference where several of our authorized depositories participated, but unfortunately did not respond. Now, what happens on the back ends internally, I can't speak to that, but we do encourage them.
So what level of a requirement can we put in that? So we just shifted our payroll account to Citizens Bank, and they were one of the earlier respondents in terms of level of interest. Well, let's look at it, but then we come back, no response. Can we require people to do that? I mean, I know we're the government. We're supposed to have some limitations on what we can do.
So,
but not to even give me a response. I mean, at least
that,
give us a response that we say, well, that's too high. I mean, but don't.
A requirement to participate in our programs. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but we have to be careful. We can't govern how they do business.
But if we
we can govern where we put our money.
We can definitely govern where we put our money and what we do with it. Yes.
But if we took a step back, Council President, when we think about the size of this program and the viability of the program, I think.
Well, not just that program. I'm just saying generally.
Right.
I know this is a new program, but just generally.
But no, we do, encourage anyone that does business with us, depositories or not, or that want to do business, and hey, we have this RFP coming out. We make sure they're on the list. If you have any questions, we encourage that.
Well, how do you encourage it? I mean, banks are like bottom line kind of people. I mean, I don't have to put my money over there. You might tell me we can't make you participate in the program, but I don't have to put my money over there. Like myself personally, I shouldn't say this in a public venue, but what I heard, I used to buy certain ties. I go to the store and get ties. And this particular store used to sell ties that was named after a guy that lived down 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? And then he ran for whatever, president and all that, I stopped buying those ties, right? Because he was like out there, right? That was a choice I made, and I'm no longer investing. So from a government perspective, you can't make me put my money in your bank, right?
That is actually true, yes.
So you need to sometimes you got to send a signal, and I can't make you, but conversely, I don't really have to put my money over here. And maybe I want to go over here with somebody that's going to participate much more aggressively as it relates to the social policies that we have here. I guess I'm just pushing the envelope. I need to know, I guess legally, what restraints you all have.
I guess if I could chime in, the banks do participate in some of the things that we want them to, right? If we're talking about some of the larger programs that we're doing, we have north of $1 billion in letter of credit support. And essentially the bank is lending us their balance sheet to backstop some of our variable rate debt. So there are a lot of things that, and in that sense, we're getting good prices, at least we would argue. So there are a lot of other things besides some of the programs that we're talking about that we do leverage the bank to ensure that they come to the table and provide the city with the level of credit and things that we need, whether it's interest rate, whether it's again, the immediate thing I can think about is the balance sheet support, which is important to how we operate from a city perspective. And so some of those larger programs, they are at the table to ensure that.
But that's fiscal, that's not social. I'm talking about social programs. You're talking like a banker. Right? So I guess I understand.
I mean, I think, again, all the banks have social programs. Obviously Councilman Johnson recently talked about the disparity. So all the banks have these programs in place. And so we need to sort of figure out how we can work with our banking partners to ensure that that we can support each other as it relates to solving these real important social issues in our community. We can only talk about the programs that we've put in front of them. And this particular one right now we thought would be challenging to put in front of them just given how they operate and the cost is so high, which is why some of the banks are not interested.
You won't get the numbers down. I know all that. You're going to get the numbers down, right? And then we'll proceed with a program to help people, because at the end of the day, the money we're talking about depositing in the banks are the taxpayers' money. So the
That's
taxpayers
correct.
should benefit as a result of having all that money in those particular banks.
And that
All right, you know what, I'm not going to belabor the point right now because I do have other colleagues and I'm over my time limit. But you get my gist.
we get it, and we
So
can definitely.
you should probably expect something in a more formalized way
Okay.
in terms of trying to, as you say, encourage lending institutions to participate in some of the programs we'd like to see them do.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome,
And
Councilman.
actually, I'm going to pick up where you left off, just a little bit, because I do think that our banks do have a social responsibility. That those that we're doing business with have a responsibility to the city of Philadelphia, and that we make this a wonderful place to want to be, to want to do business, to want to establish banks and branches throughout our network and based in Philadelphia and throughout our region. And so we should have some expectations that there is going to be a level of civic participation in what's happening in the life of the city. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about Wells Fargo, and because we are expected to operate at a higher standard, by our citizens here in Philadelphia. So when Wells Fargo was removed as a city depository, I believe that it was a good thing and in the interest of all of our citizens. And, it says to all of the people here in the city of Philadelphia and beyond that we stand with you and we stand against predators and people who operate in a predatory fashion. So I was glad we took the action. I applaud the action. But I want to just be clear, are there other accounts or do we do other business with that institution? Do we have any other accounts? Do we do other banking services? Any direct business? Anything at all with the city of Philadelphia?
Yes, we still use Wells Fargo for general banking service, consolidate cash, lockbox services. So they still do have some city service. They still supply the city with services.
What's the tune of that? How much is that? Would you guesstimate?
As of the end of February, the cash balance on that was it 286 million?
Say again?
286 million.
Combined, all of this?
Yes.
Okay. So I take it then that we don't have any sort of policy in writing or just in terms of mode of operation that states that we're not going to do business with lenders or organizations, companies, whatever, what have you, that are clearly operating in a predatory way. And Philadelphia is not the only city that has a lawsuit, as you know, against Wells Fargo. It's, throughout the nation that they've really just been a bad actor. And so do we plan to have some sort of a policy that really calls out folks who are, who are really going beyond redlining, but just really operating in the worst possible way? Because it affects our neighborhoods. It affects what happens in our neighborhood. It affects, the ability for people who live in a neighborhood to be able to buy a home in the neighborhood and to maintain and repair their properties. And so without access to capital for a lot of people, it's not going to happen. And so our neighborhoods deteriorate, We can't afford to fund them or to put enough money into them through a basic systems repair or the different programs that we have here in the city. So we really do need to rely on the lending community to be able to do as much as possible to make sure that, that these loans, these opportunities, have an opportunity to move forward.
So as far as a policy, we don't have a broad brush policy. We kind of take it case by case, and hence why it was time to do RFP for payroll, hence why we did something differently from Wells Fargo, even though they had it historically for a long time. Also with that, because with the lending disparity study, all of our authorized depositories are required to give us their social, the kind of CRA, what they're doing in the communities. Our payroll depository is required to do it on a quarterly basis, and we had that with Wells Fargo as well as our new payroll depository of Citizens Bank. And then they're also, all of our authorized depositories are required to give us that. We have the historical information from the study, but then we also ask them to give us their goals and what they plan to do in the community in the upcoming years. And that was made, I think, last week in the hearing, and the request to supply council with that information.
So you have supply council with that information?
No, we will get that too.
Okay,
Yep.
because I'd like to see who we're doing business with.
Okay.
And what their CRA, the actuality of their goals have been for the last few years.
Okay.
Because what I've seen from a lot of our large institutions is that it's almost to a point where they don't even pretend to do any significant amount of work in the neighborhoods. And the amount of lending that is done versus the overall amount of lending is shameful, in my opinion.
And then also along with that, so we started it last year, but we're committed to doing a full effort this year once this disparity study comes out, is the Commerce Department, the Treasurer's Office, as well as the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, to sit down with all of our authorized depositories and talk about the findings and what's in those studies and how we can partner together for them to be better stewards in the communities.
I think that because we know that with the administration in Washington, that rules for investing in low-income and minority communities, we know that the rules are laxed under this administration, and that they are likely to become even more laxed. And so I would like to see a policy by the Treasurer's Department in terms of when we are doing business with some of these different providers that, we have a written policy in terms of what will be acceptable and what will not be acceptable, without exception, without waivers. Because when folks come to us and want a $286 million account with the City of Philadelphia, that we have an opportunity to say, you don't meet our threshold. You don't meet the requirements that we are considering.
Now, we just want to be careful because that's we have our the resolution where the lending disparity comes from, the study comes from, and New York took our study and took it one step further with that type of policy, and that's when the banks sued them and they had to throw out the whole thing. So we just have to be careful, but we will work closely together to see what we can put in place.
Yeah, I think we could take the New York example and figure out what they did and how we can avoid, how Philly can make it better than New York.
Okay.
So whatever they did, I'm not sure, but I'm certain that we can find our way around what was done in New York so that we can, when folks come to the table and they want to do business with us, it's about dollars. I certainly get that. It's about investing. It's about investing the taxpayers' money so that we get the kind of return that helps us to be able to function and to run the city. But it's also about how are we getting those dollars? Every dollar is not a good dollar. And if you've gotten it by declining or, basically working against an entire neighborhood, redlining an entire community, then those aren't good dollars. It's not good money. And so we have to be cautious of, who's coming and how they're coming and what they've done to our neighborhoods is my point here.
Okay.
Okay. And my bell didn't ring? Okay, good. I think so, yeah. And one other quick question.
Yes.
Do we have any funds invested into manufacturers of guns, ammunition, firearms?
No, not.
In any of our investment
No.
portfolio? Okay, all right, thank you, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to follow-up question on Council President's, the costs of the, if we had $10 million to lend out to individuals at $10,000 each, you were saying the costs were 30%? Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
And the cost 30% of the 10 million?
From the proposals we've received from the RFP we put out, that's correct.
So just to be clear, we want to lend 10 million to, let's just say, $10,000 increments, and they're going to charge us 3 million of the 10 million to do the work?
From their proposal, that's correct.
Just for the record, that is insane.
This is why we haven't gone to the market to do the bond deal yet. We want to fine-tune that and shave that and sharpen that.
But let me ask you a question. When you go for a loan of $10 million, the worst case is the bank might charge you 1 point for the loan. Maybe there's a better way for us to do this through guaranteeing the loans and letting the banks just lend them directly.
We looked at that as an option, but did not get any responses from that perspective with the RFP we put out.
But I would say I would go to our lenders and make it a strong request, because 30% is unacceptable.
Agreed. Yeah.
Let me ask you a separate question. I want to discuss the reconciliation of bank accounts.
Yes.
Do you know when the last time the payroll account for the city was reconciled?
Go ahead. Well, the current, we switched over to Citizens Bank in, what was that, July 1. That is current, but the historical one with Wells Fargo, the last time was December 2010.
Are you saying that we haven't reconciled the payroll account from December of 2010 to today, to 6 or 9 months ago?
That's correct.
That's like 7 years of not reconciling. I mean, individuals reconcile every month. We didn't reconcile for 7 years the payroll account? Why did that happen?
Go ahead. I'm sorry? Well, one, I can't speak to historically as to why, but this is why, one of the reasons we have an outside consultant coming in, because when I came on and realized there were several accounts that hadn't been reconciled in many years and saw the ongoing findings, wanted to make sure that we could clean that up.
What are the other accounts that haven't been reconciled?
Go ahead.
Sorry, this is I'm Chris Schwartz, Deputy City Treasurer. One of the other bigger accounts that have not been reconciled and has been noted in the Controller's report for some time has been the general disbursement account for the City of Philadelphia.
Can you talk into the mic? I can't.
Yeah, sorry, it's the general disbursement account.
General
So
disbursement?
accounts payable, essentially.
How much in dollars are we dealing with there?
Currently in that account, I believe there's roughly about $42 million in kind of check flow.
And when was the last time that was reconciled?
That was reconciled, again, approximately 7 years ago.
7 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm confused. I thought the job of the Treasurer's Office is to reconcile accounts on a monthly basis.
That's correct.
So are you saying that we didn't do the job correctly for those 7 years?
I'll say
I can't quite say we weren't doing the job correctly, because again, I can't speak to historical, but it was an open item that we're now addressing, one with staff and then bringing in outside to catch that up, because that is a problem and we want to clean it up.
And are there any other accounts we didn't reconcile?
the general disbursement account and the payroll accounts are the primary accounts that have not been reconciled.
Is there a pension payroll account that had to be reconciled?
That is actually reconciled.
That's current.
That's current.
And so I'm just trying to understand, my time's up. I'm going to ask this last question. Is there anyone else asking questions? Okay. In the reason why I bring this up, I was reading through the June 30th, 2017 reports, and on page 151, it says there's currently a discrepancy between the account balance of the consolidated cash account as shown on the city's records and as shown on the records of the bank at which the cash balance of such account is maintained. The reported balance on the city's records is higher than the account balance on the bank's records by approximately $33.3 million. The city's engaged the services of an auditing firm to reconcile this discrepancy. This was 9 months ago. What is the status of that $33.3 million that we show on our records but not in our bank?
Okay.
So we have put out the RFP and selected a outside accounting firm to come and help us with that. Again, that is a fluctuating balance. We are reconciling that on a monthly basis and finding some historic balances or historic transactions that do go against that. Again, it is a work in process. We do have the accounting firm coming on, I think, within the next month.
Well,
We actually meet with them.
Let me ask you a question. In the past, we had our own people doing the balancing of these accounts. Why wouldn't we have hired our own people to balance these accounts? Why do we need an outside firm? Is it because this wasn't done for 7 years and there's so much catch-up?
That's correct. That's why I requested to have a firm come in, because there was the catch-up. And in my timeline that I presented, it was easier to have an outside firm come in and work with us and just to solely focus on that, while we have an actual person, we have city employees working on the current. So,
Let me just say this.
yes,
We are theoretically a board of directors of a company called the City of Philadelphia, with a budget that's approaching $4.6 billion and $4.5 billion of capital, and plus the school district. And no board of directors would allow accounts not to be balanced for 7 years. And that's mind-boggling to me. You guys are in accounting, and I assume is that normal accounting practice?
that is not normal accounting practice, and that's why I've been trying to get that cleaned up and tidied up and moving forward, so that is not an issue going forward in the treasurer's office.
Will you hire people, once we get this cleaned up, in the treasurer's office to do this reconciliation on a monthly basis?
We have them on board now. They were approved, and we have the bodies on board for the ongoing, yes.
Okay. Am I out of time, or? Okay. I'm flabbergasted by this 7 years, I gotta tell you. Especially when we're dealing with, we have in the report from June of 17 that we were short 33 million. I'm gonna tell you that if it's our money, I'd be up all night figuring this thing out. This is a lot of money we're dealing with.
And it's something that we've been highly focused on from the beginning.
I know, but it's been since June where we're trying to engage the people. I would engage them immediately. It could be a theft. I don't know what's going on here. We don't really know what's going on. Okay. Your testimony states in a budgetary request for 17 positions for fiscal year 19, yet the actual budget states 16 positions. Which one is accurate?
It's actually 17 positions.
17, okay. And then in your forecasting models, are you predicting interest rates to increase or decrease over the next several years?
We have an escalator for increase.
Increase?
Yes.
I guess my second question to that would be then, if we're forecasting rates to increase, why do we take an adjustable rate on 400 North Broad versus a fixed rate?
Well, we didn't take an adjustable rate. It is actually fixed rate for the first 9 years. And when we put out the RFP, we got the best deal that was in the market at that time for the 9 years.
We can differ on that one.
Okay.
It's okay? And I was curious as to the process we use to determine what bonds are going to be refunded, refinanced. What is the process we use for that?
Well, we have a debt policy that lays out what's in the steps with regards to refunding, but the first thing we look at is to make sure each maturity has 3% savings. And as you know, with tax reform that came in place, there's no more advance refunding, so we only have the ability to current refund bonds. So that are the bonds that have, most of our bonds have 10-year calls, so that are callable within that 90-day window, but they have to meet at minimum 3% overall savings, as well as a positive maturity by maturity savings.
3% over the term of the loan?
Right, over the term of the refunding, that's correct.
And in the general obligation refunding bond series in 2017, it was $865 million. Was that refinancing old debt, or did we take on some new debt?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
That's okay. In the general obligation refunding bond series 2017, it was $262,865,000. Was that refinancing old debt, or is there some new debt included in that?
That's all old debt,
All old debt?
yes.
Okay. And you know the terms of that series, the interest rate and term?
Well, they had varying maturities of interest rate, but we can get the detail for you.
Okay. And are we saving money? Do you know what the overall savings was of that refunding? Any idea?
Say that again, I'm
Was
sorry.
there a savings in that refinance?
Yes, the total savings was $25 million, or either a net present value savings of 9.63%.
And where is that $25 million going?
It goes back into the general fund.
Is that $25 million a one-time savings or annual?
No, that's the total, the annualized savings. The
Over
total
the term?
is over the
25
term of the
million.
life of the loan, yes.
And today, what are the current interest rates that we would look for in general obligation debt, just a range in today's market? What would you say they are?
Right now, well, we're looking to do the art museum project, so, and a small current refunding as well. And we've been looking in the market, and right now, the average all-in is around a little under 4, like 3.7.
That's good. So based on that, should we be looking at doing more refinancing, especially since our bond rating went down a little? We have the potential that may change the ratings. Should we be looking at more refinancing to lock in that 3.7?
Well, at this time, we can only do current refundings, so we can only refund bonds that are callable within the 90-day window, but we are monitoring to see what is out there that we can refund.
So on bonds that aren't callable, is there a payment penalty involved?
Yeah, you have to escrow to maturity, so then you lose all of your savings because you're actually escrowing that the payment to the end of the bond's life.
Okay. In the budget, why are 2018 estimates for the investment and banking program $22 million more than what was budgeted?
I'm sorry.
In the budget for 2018, you have estimates for what's called the investment and banking program in your budget. It says $22 million more than what was budgeted was spent.
Is that interest? Sorry, just looking at the budget.
I can show it to you
now.
offline. I don't want to. We can show it to you offline if
Okay.
you like. Can you just explain what are the other government's non-tax revenues that make up $471 million in your fiscal year 19 budget?
Go ahead. Go ahead. It's
Sorry,
made-
a lot of that is made up
PICA.
of the PICA, the money, the excess that we get back from PICA after we pay them the various taxes that they.
So you're saying we're getting back $471 million a year from PICA?
That's the estimated number. Yeah.
That's the estimated number there.
So I wasn't here, I don't know if you were here, Council President, but back in time, I guess, we instituted a 1.5 increase on the wage tax to pay the PICA bonds. And this is the excess that's not going to the bonds, that's coming back to us?
Yeah, so it wasn't that we implemented 1.5%. The 1.5% of the existing wage tax was redirected to be essentially security for the PICA bonds, and then the debt service would come out of that, but it was always a big multiple of what the actual debt service was. And the debt service has gone down over time. As it goes down, more and more of the PICA tax money comes back to the city, and that revenue is built into our 5-year plan.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Council
Good,
President.
Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. We're going to take a break. We'll be back at 2:15. And we will,
Do you have?
I'm sorry,
Do
sinking
you
fund?
want sinking fund to come back at 2:15 or?
I mean, do you want to come back at 2? All right. Read your testimony, sir.
Matthew Wellman, Executive Director of the Sinking Fund Commission.
Treasurer, this threw you under the meeting.
No, I just want
I can make it very quick.
No, okay.
So our budget is entirely for debt service and debt-related payments. Our total all funds request this year is $678.8 million, which is actually a decrease of almost $24 million from last year.
Okay.
And $295 million of that is general fund.
Okay. Thank you. Just state your name for the record.
Matthew Bowman,
Yeah.
Executive Director of the Sinking Fund Commission.
Thank you. We're actually going to be calling you guys back
Okay.
with a couple of things that we didn't get resolved today. And one of them is, check on the progress of the loan program.
Fair
So
enough.
you can have a more extensive interaction at that time, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilman, hold on. Councilman, you had a question?
Yes, Council President.
Yeah, I'm
Couple
sorry.
of quick questions. Just in general, when are payments made for debt service? Are they made monthly or quarterly?
For each particular bond issue, they're made generally twice a year. We actually have payment dates. Most months we have payments on the 15th and the 1st of the month.
Semi-annual.
Correct.
And when are deposits made into the sinking fund? And what determines the amount of the deposit?
The amount of the deposit is exactly what's due for debt service.
And okay. When are those deposits made?
Generally just prior to when debt service is paid.
And the breakdown of Class 200 rent payments, it's $110 million. Any idea what that rent covers?
Those are all the city service agreement bond issues, so anything issued through paid or PMA or PRA.
All the properties the city rents, basically?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
The breakdown of Class 200 rent payments of $110 million, I'm just curious what that
That's the debt service for our city service agreements. So anytime we issue bonds through paid, the redevelopment authority, the municipal authority, it comes out of that Class 200.
And so then there was a Class 200 decrease, which is good, of $26 million in PMA lease payments. Why did that happen?
It was just the natural roll-off of debt service. So there was no different restructurings or anything. It's just that was the natural.
We like roll-offs, that's good.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We'll be back at 2:15.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and at that time, we will have our good friends from pensions. Thank you.